let me go to my guests. I am joined with the one and only. There we are. If I can get this up. There we are. I'm joined with the one and only Arnaud Develay. He is an international lawyer specializing in international criminal law and participating in defense of former President Saddam Hussein, along with former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark. In the wake of the Caesar Act, he documented the illegal sanction regime imposed by Syria while living in Damascus. He is author of Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of American Political Consensus. Arnaud, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Always a pleasure.
No, man, I really do appreciate it. I want to start on gas wars. I'm fascinated by this story that has come out. So apparently, despite the fact that there's a war going on, gas or oil, I'm just going to say energy, was still transiting from Russia through Ukraine into Europe. Now, I became aware of this story because of Fico. Robert Fico of Slovakia pointed out this is an issue. We get much of our energy from Russia through that pipeline. If you stop that pipeline, you're going to adversely affect us. And the contracts apparently end at the end of the year. So January 1st, apparently Ukraine and Europe will get no more gas through that transit line. I've heard Putin on this basically saying you made your bed, now you got to lie in it, being a bit exasperated because Ukraine is also simultaneously trying to do a lawsuit basically to get energy without paying for it with the court in Stockholm. Could you go into this for me and kind of explain this to the audience? I was fascinated when I heard this. And what are going to be the consequences of this?
Well, as you say, this is pretty much, par for the course as far as the law of unintended consequences. Suffice it to say that gas has been flowing into Ukraine all throughout the special military operation. And this has been actually the case in many conflicts before. There were materials declassified about a couple of days ago bearing on the United States doing business with Nazi Germany in 1943. So all those contractual issues always over the military situation, no matter what the conflict is. They are what you might call it, situations where the parties to the conflict are trying not to delve too much into it, but basically it's do as I say, do not do as I do. As far as Europe is concerned, they've been going full on with the sanctions. They've been obeying Washington as far as not having anything to do with Russia. And now those contracts are basically about to expire. There's no sunset provision, into effect. And Moldova, for instance, is about to get their gas supplies turned off on January 1st. And so this is really, something that is nothing new. It has happened before. But again, it all comes down to, you basically get what you asked for. We provided you with cheap supplies of energy to power your economies. And you've allowed yourself, through your own loss of sovereignty, to be told by some other powers to basically act against your own interest and that of your citizens. And so do not come out now and complain about a situation that you are mostly responsible for.
What would be the consequences for this? I mean, when I look at Europe now, it's not the same Europe before this conflict started. I mean, Germany, let's take Germany, for example. They've been deindustrialized. And many of those companies are ending up in America. What's wild about it, I saw a French, I don't know who the guy was, but he was doing this kind of analysis, basically saying we are being screwed, that this increase in the amount of money that we're paying for weapons and dumping into Ukraine is effectively going to weapons. I think he said like 70% or more are coming from the United States. So they're effectively spending billions in euros to America for weapons that are going to Ukraine, which is effectively draining Europe of money in the way this is working out. He also pointed out that many of the companies that are leaving Europe because they can't afford the energy costs are going to America in order to operate. So once again, you have this deindustrialization on top of losing money to Ukraine. And now you have Ukraine, after taking hundreds of billions of dollars from Europe, about to make a choice that is going to damage Europe's economic security, because energy is by definition on some level economic security. I mean, even if you get toilet paper, you have to make it somehow, and it requires energy in that process to make it. All of these things are effectively damaging Europe. It seems that America is cannibalizing Europe. I mean, how do you view it? Do the Europeans not see this? I remember Angela Merkel mentioned this in her book. But what happened? How do they not see what is effectively happening to Europe? Give me your take on that. You pay attention to the stuff.
Well, I guess it all comes down to one word. It's they have the United States have placed through the European Union construct a whole set of vassals who, for ideological reason and also to line up their own pockets. I mean, because make no mistake about it, someone like von der Leyen and all the people sitting on the European Commission do not care about the well-being of their constituencies, as it were.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding their talk about creating a federal super state, they only care about lining up their pockets, and so they are American agents essentially. Whether you're talking about the Western commissioners or the former commissioners from the former Eastern Bloc, they were selected, identified, cultivated, going back 30 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And over time, they were incorporated in think tank and security complexes, the Atlantic Council. And so those people are basically, they're American agents. They're not, European patriots, as it were. And to the extent there are movements of, one might say, a protest or a political resistance to this state of affair, we now have von der Leyen, who unveiled the democratic shield. This is the new word now coming out of this newspeak European Commission, which basically claims to want to protect democratic value and people's ability to cast a vote without outside, i.e., Russian interference. And so this setup allows the Commission to intervene in elections of member states and potentially cancel out the election, as we've seen in Romania recently, when not a pro-Russian, but a pro-Romania candidate was calculated, Georgescu, that's his name, was calculated to win the election outright with over 60% of the vote. The European Commission's endorsed candidate did not come until merely came as third. And so, considering the NATO juxtaposition over the European Union is the political arm of NATO, essentially. Mm-hmm. Romania is a key cog in the system, in the setup, because it borders the Black Sea, it borders Ukraine, and it is home to one of the, if not the largest NATO base on NATO's Eastern Front. So this helps us to understand the fundamental nature of Europe, which is more of a anti-Russian construct as opposed to a home state for European, which we were sold as Europe is peace and nationalism is war. It turns out that it's exact opposite now, and owing to the internal contradiction born out of the fiasco that is the Ukraine war, for Europe at least, we're seeing the European Commission as the point mechanism for Euro-Atlantic interest, unleash censorship measures, if not outright dictatorial powers, preventing people to exchange on what's considered perceived as sensible topics, and if need be, to essentially neutralize potential threats under the form of candidates in some countries whenever an election is being held. And this person is not under their control. They will, and we've seen it in Romania the last few days,
Hmm.
in the wake of the Constitutional Court outlandish opinion bearing on why they decided to cancel out the election.
TikTok video.
Basically, yeah, they talked about TikTok video, but then there was an investigation that revealed that it was actually the socialists within that country who were using TikTok to create
Yes.
a split. So, but it's okay, no problem,
But they
and
killed
it
the election over
goes.
that. They literally killed the election over that.
Yes, yes. And so not only that, but they will bring on trumped up charges those candidates, those out of control candidates, to face court proceedings, and in some cases to throw them and their entourage in jail. This is what has been advocated openly, actually, in official documents circulating.
Hmm.
In Moldova, it's the same situation. And to the extent, Georgia, for the time being, seems to have weathered the color revolution attempt against its own institutions. Uh, you can bet that they will try again. They will try to apply pressure on the new Georgian government. So, in one word, I would say democracy is dead in Europe, and to prevent the economic consequences of cutting yourself off cheap energy supplies from transforming itself into political upheaval, which would be the worst case scenario. The European Commission, as the long arm of the transatlantic complex, is ready to go full out and denounce anyone calling out for peace with Russia, or calling out for reestablishing Nord Stream 2, or to turn on Nord Stream 1. I mean, there's still one pipeline that does work, if only
Hmm.
they were willing to open the spigot, as a Russian agent, essentially, as a disinformation. Mike Pence touched on the issue when he mentioned that going back to 2015, NATO essentially was turned against the citizen of its own member states. Why? Because the idea was that for the 21st century, the NATO ran military industrial complex is basically gearing up to confront full on what it calls in the Pentagon, DOD white papers, Russia and China as revisionist power. Revisionist power in the sense that they are calling into question the preeminence of American hegemony. So, in order to create a war economy able to sustain a full-blown, full spectrum and confrontation of those two rivals, peer-to-peer rival, they have anticipated that the populations of those member states would basically disagree with this policy. They would try to preserve the social welfare program and the providence state inherited from World War II. And so this down the road would create an obstacle. So they had to, in order to dismantle those welfare systems and gear the whole economy toward a war economy, they have to start basically stigmatizing anybody or any political force, any party, as a purveyor of disinformation, if not outright pro-Russian, and so in so doing anti-democratic. So they are protecting democracy in spite of ourselves. That's where
Protecting
we are now.
democracy by destroying democracy.
That's
So,
right.
is it fair to say democracy is dead in Europe? I mean, because honestly, political upheaval may be the only way out for the Europeans to disagree with this. Like, I know I keep bringing this up. I was in Europe covering the elections in Europe, the parliamentary elections. The public doesn't seem to be fully on board with this, despite the leadership being on board with this. I mean, is public upheaval the only way out of this? I mean, I know that's people don't necessarily like to hear that, but is it true?
Well, I mean, we always tend to say that revolutions are right to happen when there's no food. So for the
Right.
time being, the food somehow there's still food in the fridge, but it's more complicated than that. I mean, it's also the result of engineering, social engineering policies that have been put in place for the last 50, 60 years, not least of which owing to this theory peddled by what was called the French theory proponents like the Jacques Derrida and Foucault, bearing on structuralism and critical theory. And the idea was to basically eradicate any sense of grounding in those society and to create a sense of relativism. That basically we have just the construct of the society in which we evolve, as opposed to the culmination of transgenerational processes.
Mhm.
Consumerism was and hedonism were promoted also, and the idea of the individual as the be all and end all of societal constructs. So in so doing, first you unravel the idea of a nation, then you go after the family, and then basically you go after the individual himself by saying you are not what you see in the mirror, you are potentially something else, and a multiplicity of it. You basically accompany those, because this is basically what's being peddled in mass media in Western Europe, if not in America, at least the last 4 years, because wokeism is the ultimate, the final crystallization of this process. It started
Mm.
with structuralism in the 70s. Critical theory aimed to replace classical Marxism, and we ended up with woke. And we see now the damage that this has done on those societies and those societies' immunity, defense mechanism to understand what's going on and proceed to address the problem by creating alternate communities. So it's a very complicated process. It has not been happening just yesterday, and it's deeply ingrained. And to the extent we would hope that people will start rejecting what's been imposed onto them, we have to really look deeper and understand the mechanisms that have been put in place for the last 60 years or so.